Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. I'm Catherine Tindall, a CPA here with Dominion. We're a specialty tax and accounting firm that serves advisor practices. On today's episode, this is kind of a unique episode for us because we're going to be talking to Patricia Lizarraga from Hypatia Women's CEO Index and ETF. I don't usually do investment related content, so this is going to be a new one for us, but we're going to be talking today about her fund and just some of the things that she's observed on the advisor side with having conversations around, client acquisition and investment strategy and how you should be thinking about some of those things. So her fund invests in American public companies with female CEOs. She's invested in women in leadership for over 15 years, and she's created the first public fund to invest in women CEOs. I was very intrigued because I saw you on another podcast, and I thought it was very interesting, so I wanted to have our conversation today. So thank you for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time, Patricia.
Thank you for having me, Catherine. And I love the, title of your podcast, Financial Advisors Want to Know. And I think that that's a really action-oriented and helpful podcast. So I was excited to be invited.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of a joke for me because it's kind of, also Catherine wants to know. It's like I invite people on because I'm interested in what they're doing and
Mhm.
always feel like these conversations are valuable for me and then valuable in the conversations that I have with our clients who are advisors. So thanks for coming on. We were having a really interesting kind of initial conversation prior to hitting record here that I think is a great place for us to start, which is you were discussing a little bit about some of what you've seen in behaviors with that advisors encounter with female clientele
Mhm.
and their preferences that might be different and how they can be orienting the way that they're talking to female clientele or attracting new female clientele. um, let's maybe start there. So what are some things that you've noticed with trends with the advisors and in that kind of dynamic?
Sure. So first of all, one of the big things that's happening this decade and the next decade in the United States and really in the developed world is what people are calling the Great Wealth Transfer. I'm sure that you have heard that. And so the Great
Mhm.
Wealth Transfer means that because of women, live longer and a host of other reasons that have to do with women having already acquired more wealth, there is going to be a transfer of wealth from men to women, where women will
Mhm.
account for the majority of the wealth in the United States. So the financial industry has really woken up to that and said, okay, how do we capture those clients? And
Mhm.
that's one thing that I've noticed. And second, as that's happened, the financial industry itself is trying to figure out, okay, how do we market better to women clients? Because traditionally, the investment and retirement money, savings, et cetera, has been marketed to men.
Mhm.
And and in doing that, the financial services firms and the industry in general is trying to attract more women advisors because there's a clear connection between women
Yeah.
advising women. So the final thing what I hear a lot when I go to conferences where there is advisors are, how do I get more women clients? Right?
Mhm.
That wealth transfer is happening. How do I, as a financial advisor, participate in that? Which is why I love financial advisors want to know because it's the question that we've been getting. And so, as with everything else Hypatia does, we say, well, let's look at the research. Let's look at the data and what is it telling
Mhm.
us? And there's now, reams of data that is saying that women are very interested in knowing what they're invested in,
Mhm.
right? Not, and why am I invested in that? And why is that purposeful? Why is that interesting? They're more in that sense willing to explore how their values are aligned with their investments.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. And so how can advisors think about that and what can they talk to the women about? So it's good, one thing that at least I believe and I hope most women believe is that, women like talking about women,
Mhm.
about how things may be different or what their lived experiences are or um, how their life has been maybe less linear. than
Mhm.
perhaps males, executives, et cetera. So
Mhm.
to have data points where you can talk to women about women is something that you're going to get them interested in the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
because that's what advisors, when they're trying to acquire clients, is they're trying to service that client, understand what that client wants. And one of the things that we know that they want is what the research is telling us: women like to talk about women.
Mhm.
So what we say is the Hypatia Women CEO Index is a very easy thing to bring up to engage your client. Have you ever seen this, whether or not you even suggest they invest in it or not? Like, have you seen there is this one investment opportunity in the world that actually puts your investment dollars into companies that are led by women? And that can lead to a really interesting conversation of, oh, well, how many women CEOs are there? Well,
Mhm.
it turns out there's 175 American public companies led by a woman CEO. 175. There's 100 more that are in micro caps. And the Hypatia Women CEO Index and ETF is invested in all of them.
Mhm. Yeah.
So this gives an opportunity to talk about to women clients about if that's something that they would want to invest in or not.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's just a conversation opener. And I know, something that I was interested in with this is and I know for advisors this would be a big piece too, is like on the performance side, what are some of the like data and statistics or, general trends that you've seen in terms of like differences in performance or similarities in performance between um, what your fund is investing in versus, typical, market returns and that sort of thing. Like, have you noticed any interesting, trends or changes?
Yes, so that was a perfect segue, right? Once you say, is this something you'd be interested, you might get the question, or the advisor themselves might say, but okay, what are the returns? And it's
Hmm.
actually Hypatia's investment thesis that women CEOs today will outperform the market. Why will they
Hmm.
outperform? Because it's harder for women to get there, right? McKinsey and a number of other research consultants tell us that there are still obstacles in the workplace for women moving ahead. So so the question is, can you deliver just the female factor? Because if you can deliver the female factor, then you should get some kind of alpha. That was
Hmm.
our investment thesis. And we set out to figure out, okay, is that true or not? And we were able to obtain data back to 2018. So we have about 7 years of data. And remember that 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 prior to that, there were just so few women CEOs. At some point, it becomes statistically irrelevant, right? So
Yeah.
so we went back 5 years when we started the index. Now we're at 7, and we said, okay, let's apply our methodology and see what we get as a result.
Hmm.
And our methodology, basically, what it says is, okay, let's take all the women CEOs and let's eliminate factors that are not about delivering the female factor. We found two big factors. One is
Hmm.
size. So it turns out you don't have a woman CEO running an American public company until you get to company number 26. I mean, it changes around because it's market cap. Company number 26 yesterday was Oracle.
Hmm.
So the 25 companies that are bigger than Oracle in the United States are all led by men. So company
Hmm.
26, you get Oracle, which is led by the Cats. So you have to eliminate size as a factor.
Hmm.
And the other factor is very it needs to be eliminated is industry.
Hmm.
So we have almost 30 stocks between biotechnology and specialty retail. And that's way overweight what the market is. So the
Hmm.
question is, how can you adjust for that? And you do that by making it industry neutral to its benchmark index, which in our case is the S&P 600, the small cap
Hmm.
index. Why is
Okay.
it the small cap index? Because in order to eliminate size, we equally weighted it.
Hmm.
So this is the methodology, but what it gives us is that women outperform the small cap index by about 100 basis points per year since inception.
Wow, that's really interesting. And in terms of interpreting that, Do you have any, why do you think that is? That's been like that?
Just a slight interruption in this conversation. I wanted to bring to your attention two things that are important for you to know. So, we're always at the mercy of social media algorithms. So, if you can subscribe to the show, that would mean a lot to me. Even more to me if you can leave a rating and let me know what you think about it. But we have a new newsletter that's coming out. It's going to be very active in 2025 that is specifically around tax issues that I'm seeing advisors face in their own practices, changes in legislations, and the pieces that I think are critically important for you to stay ahead of as an advisor with the new administration. So nearby, wherever you're interacting with this, will be the link of how to sign up for our newsletter. Also nearby will be the link to my LinkedIn, which is the best way to get in touch with me, learn more about what we're doing for advisors in the tax strategy and compliance work that we do, and also to get access to the various tools and interviews and things that I do, specifically designed to help you improve your practice, improve your own tax situation, etc. So let's get back to the episode, and thanks for tuning in.
Because it's harder for women to get to the top. So by definition, the women that make it to the CEO spot are extraordinary. Within the cohort of CEOs, they've had to overcome, they're only, between 7 and 8% of the population of all CEOs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they've had to overcome these barriers that don't exist for the other 93%. I'm not saying the other 93 don't have barriers. Everybody has their own barriers. But what all the women have in common is they've had to overcome the barriers that may be specific to women.
Yeah, that's really
so you can actually compare it to everybody else.
That's really interesting.
What those barriers are, why they exist, whether they'll ever be eliminated. That is a different subject matter that Hypatia we're not saying anything about that. We're just saying right now, our belief is women are going to outperform because the ones that make it are so extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's, they're the fighting, right? It's like they're the ones that really had to fight. And so you would expect that behavior would translate, which that's really interesting that, the thesis has been proven by the data over time. Do you, in terms of looking into the future, what do you see on the horizon for, female CEOs or for the fund, or,
Sure.
in addition to just like the regular wealth transfer, like what do you see kind of on the business side of things for how things may change?
So just to start, obviously past performance is no indication of future performance. We have an investment thesis. It may or may not pan out. Looking back, it has panned out, right? From January 1st, 2018 till now, yes. But what's going to happen in the future? We believe that there is going to be a continued increase of women CEOs. How fast that is going to happen is anybody's guess. Right? There is there's a lot of different factors that influence how many, how the demographic change of our workforce is and how the leadership pipelines work. But we believe that the fastest way to get more women in the CEO spot is to have more women CEOs. Right? So McKinsey, the World Bank, et cetera, they all tell us that having women on the sidelines is not good for the global economy, right? The global economy is going to be better off with more people engaged. So if you have one part of the population that's not engaged at all, you're going to have you're going to have worse results than if all women were engaged. So our belief is that the best way to get more women engaged is to have more women CEOs, because women, the data, and we do measure this, we're the only people that have this information, is that it turns out women CEOs have teams that are senior leadership teams that are 80% more female than men leadership teams. Women CEOs have leadership teams that are approximately 35%. So even women CEOs, their senior leadership teams are still 2/3 men. But the men are at 20%. So that differential starts trickling down through the whole organization, and you get more women promoted, more women engaged, more women excited about being in the workforce, and therefore you're spreading around the ability to retain talent.
Mm-hmm.
So we see going forward that there will be an increase in women CEOs. That is the direction. We don't know the speed,
Yeah.
and we believe that that feeds on itself.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think from, start where the data was starting in 2018 to now, how much of the numbers changed in terms of how many female CEOs there are?
So we usually see, an increase of 5 to 10 net CEOs a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's really been different every year, and it also, you have to think, is it the same rate at the size at the company?
Yeah, at the
There
same
is no
sizes.
woman CEO until you get to company number 26 in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
and that tells us something, right? Women are
Yeah.
leading smaller companies.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they leading smaller companies? Why are there no women in the Magnificent Seven? Is it a
Mm-hmm.
technology issue? There's less women in technology. That's why we had to adjust for industry.
Mm-hmm.
If we had just made it equal, no adjustment, we'd have a healthcare and retail fund, not a female fund.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to, we have to understand that it's not a straight line necessarily,
Yeah.
and it hopefully will be accelerating.
Yeah, fascinating. So for the advisors who are listening, are there any, big takeaways or revelations or things that you've encountered when talking to different, you know, basically these kinds of organizations where they're doing, more just investing for individuals? Are there any things that you think that they need to hear in terms of, that we haven't hit today,
Mhm.
this
So,
conversation?
so the WCO is definitely a conversation starter, and it'll get your client probably quite engaged.
Hmm.
When you look at the actual ETF, you want to there's a few things that might bring questions to you. So the first is we have a small AUM, and it's important to understand that ETFs have full liquidity, right? The liquidity
Hmm.
of an ETF has to do with the underlying securities, and we don't have securities that have less than a $500 million market cap. So from that point, you can assure your clients it's quite liquid. Second is the fact that, it is it is a new strategy, and
Hmm.
it is a niche strategy. So
Hmm.
so sometimes being the only one is tough. But what you can see is that there's 7 years of an index and there's 2 years of trading track record where you will see that the NAV, you know, the difference between the net asset value and the price is minimal, right? So it
Hmm.
tracks what it's supposed to be tracking extremely close. And you will see that since inception, we have been beating the S&P 600 since our inception, right? In their
Yeah.
inception, which, isn't apples to apples, but it's the information we have.
Yeah. No, and
So,
it's
so,
really,
so,
really
so it's a new
interesting.
strategy. It's a niche strategy. It has liquidity, and it fits in a small cap allocation because that's how Morningstar categorizes us, which is correct. It calls a U.S. small cap blend, and it's something that you can get. We ask clients, is it on purpose that your portfolio is so overweight men?
Mm.
Is it on purpose if you believe in women that you have less than 5% of the companies you're invested in led by women? And they say,
Hmm.
no, it's not on purpose. That's what's in my portfolio. And we say, well, here's a way to intentionally change that a little bit,
Hmm.
by making a small but meaningful allocation, and collectively, that'll start making some impact.
Yeah, I love it. No, and I think it's really interesting too, as, an advisor, when you're thinking through really that client journey, it's like, even if it's not a huge shift, just the opening up of that conversation and being able to have that is and thinking in those terms of like, are there some niche things that we should employ in here because it's going to help them become more engaged, than just really passive in the
Absolutely. Women
relationship,
care
right?
about what they're invested in and their legacy,
Hmm.
right? Is this something you want to put in your granddaughter's Roth IRA?
Yeah.
Is this something you want to, tell her I believed in women CEOs?
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Fascinating.
it's a real legacy conversation starter,
Hmm.
and it's a pure play because, and I'm not knocking any other securities, but there's been a lot of questioning about greenwashing, right?
Hmm.
And what does ESG mean? And why isn't Tesla ESG if it's a if it's an electric, et cetera? And the thing about the WCO is it is very, very clear that it invests in what it says. It says
Hmm.
women CEOs, and we have 175 holdings of companies that are women CEOs. And guess what? If the woman leaves, we sell the stock that month.
Hmm.
We rebalance every month. So it's a very, very active ETF, which it shouldn't be compared price-wise to S&P 600, ETF from Vanguard. It should be compared to active small cap funds, which were for the most part outperforming.
Nice. That's really cool. So for people who are looking to get more information, where's the best place for them to start to learn more?
The best place is the website of the ETF, which is the WCOETF.com.
Love it. And definitely connect, follow Patricia on LinkedIn because you do very cool interviews, and I've been very interested watching, kind of the progress here. But for those of you listening, we'll post the links nearby wherever you're encountering this to check out the ETF's website. And then just as a disclaimer, I don't, endorse things because I'm a tax professional and I don't know, I can't give any kind of investment advice, but I just thought that this conversation was a conversation that was important to have and share with you all. So thank you so much, Patricia, for joining me on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time and, explaining, what you've built, how you've built it, why you've built it, how it's doing, where people can learn more about, the work that you're doing. So thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Catherine, for having me, and I'm glad we could share some information.